Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So excited that you could join us. If you're joining us live or later on in the archive, I'm Sarah Ottow, the Director of Confianza, and I'd like to introduce our guest today, Sarah Saeed. It's so nice that you could join us here, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. How's it going? I'm excited to be here. It was a nice, relaxing Memorial Day weekend, and now this is a nice time to just kick off the week and join you all here on Facebook Live.
That's great. Yeah, and if you're looking at us on Facebook Live, that's wonderful. And you can also check us out on our website, which is playing the same video, and all the other videos are archived there, and that's ellstudents.com/videos. So check us out in either place. And like I said, Sarah, we're so happy to have you here. I just want to let the audience know, if you don't follow Sarah Saeed, you should. She's a phenomenal educator and contributor at large. She doesn't just contribute for Confianza, where she has done, count them, 15 blogs for us in the past 5 years, plus 3 that we did together for Teaching Channel. Sarah, it's hard for me to summarize what you do. So why don't you introduce us to you and your work?
Well, you can follow me on Twitter at MRSSAID17 and to learn all about me and the work I do. But currently, I am the Director of Language and Equity Programs at a charter school called the Elgin Math and Science Academy Charter. We are about 30 miles west of, maybe a little more west of Chicago. And we're a campus that is in the middle of a beautiful piece of land that is protected land. We are what you would call an EL education school, which EL stands for expeditionary learning. So we really provide a different approach to education, and our language learners, our multilingual students, really get a different opportunity for some hands-on learning within nature that they wouldn't get in your general public school.
That's so exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
What else can you tell us about your background? Because you come with more than that. That's a relatively new position for you, right?
It is. This is year 2 in that position, and I've been working with language learners for about 15 years, a little more than that. And I started off as a high school teacher, and I was teaching reading in ELA to language learners, and then I was in a Arabic bilingual role, and I've also been a middle school dean and a district level for 2 districts at the same time, ELL director. And now I'm doing this role where I am the director of our multilingual programs, but I'm also there to support school-wide equity. And so a lot of that work has been in conjunction with some of the work I've done as a change agent, where I've utilized some of the resources being a Confianza change agent this year to support my teachers and our teachers in understanding, instruction through a language lens. And also I've done a lot of work supporting our school through a fellowship program that I've been in through Reimagining Migration.
That's excellent. And I know Confianza partners with Reimagining Migration. We've had a couple of our folks, including myself and Amy and Marisa on our team, go through the fellowship program. So hello to Adam and the UCLA folks at Reimagining Migration. It's great to be connected. We believe at Confianza that you can't do this work alone. And that's one of the reasons I started the company, because I was in your shoes, both as a district level and school level leader and teacher. And it's so complex and it's so multi-layered. I love your connection in your current role between supporting the multilingual education and just school-wide, campus-wide equity. That's a really important view that you bring.
It is. And currently we're having some professional development that's happening, professional learning, we like to say professional learning, that's happening around equity, and having conversations about, implicit bias and structural racism, and understanding what that means in the scope of a school setting, and really working with our teachers to learn more about infusing culture and culturally responsive teaching and learning into the classroom.
I love that.
So that's a big part of what I do.
That's so great. And it is a nice complement to some of the pieces that we do together. I know we're going to get into your blog in a moment, one of your many blogs, your most recent blog, but you had mentioned the Change Agents program that you're in with us. Yeah. And this was a pilot, private beta, I guess you would say, launch that we did with Friends of Confianza last year, and Sarah was on that team. And it's really about change agents for equity, language, and literacy, because we believe that ELL is really about us, which is what we need to do as educators. So you really share that philosophy, and it's really clear in your work that I follow.
Yeah, and it's been a lifelong mission, and EMSA, Elgin Math and Science Academy, has really given me an opportunity to really be creative in how we think about this work and the implementation of that, and particularly with our multilingual students and their families, and involving their families in the school community. It's been so far an amazing 2 years just doing that work.
That's fabulous. I know one of your most popular blogs on our site, and I know you blog for others like Ed Week and Reimagining Migration and Teaching Tolerance, right?
Yeah.
One of your most popular blogs that we see on the analytics at ELLstudents.com at Confianza is about family engagement going beyond being the multicultural potluck and going beyond, what those of us in culturally responsive education are familiar with, like beyond heroes and holidays, really going deeper into relationships. And so as we transition and going into this recent blog around this framework of equity-based mindset, so you really believe that it's not just the role of the ELL department or the MLL department or the MLL teacher coordinator, right? You really believe, as we do, we have that shared value that it really takes the whole school to work with families and students in culturally responsive ways.
It does. And I think I have a very supportive boss who really, I have an idea, she tells me to run with it. And, she, I could be, all over the place sometimes, but she'll kind of say, Saeed, let's kind of look at this. Let's understand it and how it's going to benefit your students and really try to roll with it. And I think one of the things that we were really able to do with, as a whole school, with the support from the fellowship I had at Reimagining Migration, is really think about identity affirmation and what that means for our students and families. And so we spent the entire year this year together as a school exploring a book, and the book was called The Name Jar. And that book, it was just about names, and a student who she comes from South Korea, and she has a name that's unique, and her peers laugh at her name at first, and then they're like, well, you should choose an American name. And then in the end, somebody kind of says to her, well, your name is who you are, and that's so important, and it's beautiful. And so we've had that exploration this year with our kids and families. And we did have an end of the year culmination with that, and there was food, but that wasn't the only thing. It kind of went beyond where we started off at the beginning of the year. We had conversations with kids, conversations with parents. We have our weekly, our dean does a phenomenal job doing these weekly community crews where not only is the audit, our commons area open to all students, but it's also open to their families every Friday morning. Right. And it's part of being an EL education school. And they come in as part of crew and that culture. And they come in and we talk about, names and how they're unique. And we talk about different cultures, and different kids every week are presenting, and it's things that they've prepared with their families about their culture. Sometimes it is related to holidays because, there are holidays that, people don't understand. Like Ramadan was one that, around the world, people don't, if you're not Muslim, it's hard to understand it. So we had those conversations with our students about honoring these holidays in a sense of learning about them. And what they mean. You're not having we don't have your typical Christmas celebrations. We don't do Halloween. It's more of a, let's learn about the different cultures and the traditions they have.
It's great because it does need to connect to identity and going beyond the superficial or level of culture to the deeper level. Let's dive into your latest blog, which really connects to everything that you just shared. And thank you so much for providing all that context for us. Yeah. You write about in your latest blog, and it is the latest one on our website at ELLstudents.com/blog, and it is called Engaging Multilingual Learners in Distance Learning and Beyond. And you really talk about these 3 R's as not just being something that we need to do now during this emergency remote teaching that we're all doing, but all the time. So let's walk through those 3 R's. So we've got number 1, relationships, right? Number 2, resources. And number 3, response. So tell us about the relationship piece, and let's walk us through that important part.
One of the, people have kind of tapped into me over these last couple months about, Sarah, you work with families a lot. How do we get them engaged? And in schools that are far away from mine or even, close by, they've asked questions of, we've had kids that we're not seeing online. and these are our multilingual learners. What are you doing differently? And I think what it is this. It's a relationship we've had beforehand. I think that if you've established a relationship with your multilingual families where it's more than just your 4 times a year BPAC and a food fest at the end of the year, I think that you're going to be able to keep those kids online, working with you, whether it be online or paper packet. We also, we have to be equitable in understanding the resources our families have. But, if you've established that relationship first, then you're not going to struggle as much with having your students participate in your distance learning. And so that relationship, though, has to go farther than just posting assignments online. In a sense, we're all becoming our parents' instructional coaches. They're at home, they're working with their kids, and we're having to support them in supporting their children. And so that means, the idea that we have to do what we can to make ourselves available during the school day to our families as they are, working and guiding their students through e-learning or distance learning or remote learning, whatever you are calling it. Right. in your entity. Everybody calls it something different.
Right. Same thing. Trying to keep the ball moving right here, this last half of school. So, it occurs to me as you're talking that what I've seen with schools that we work with, and you and I have had conversations about this, texting since the pandemic began, is if those relationships aren't in place and those channels aren't in place, then it really shows now, right? More than ever.
Yes.
So it's even more important to keep the relationships at the fore.
Yeah. And I, as a leader, I would be worried. I'd be very worried if I was struggling to get my multilingual learners online, because that means that there is a structural issue happening.
Well said. So let's move into the next R, because it has very much to do with structural issues and how are we organizing programs, right, to support the needs of our most vulnerable populations. And that's number 2, which is resources. So what do you have to say about the importance of resources and strong family engagement, especially at this time?
One, you need the people. And here's what I mean. You need to make sure that you have staff that can communicate with families in native language. I think that, our program is majority Spanish speakers. And I think that if I really couldn't understand Spanish, my Spanish is probably what you would call intermediate. If I couldn't understand Spanish, if I couldn't speak to parents over the phone in Spanish, it would be a real struggle for parents to, communicate with us and understand, what is expected. Every document we've put out there for families has been translated because, it is critical to assure that, and that should be something that you should be doing beyond remote learning. You should be translating all of your school's documents in your major native languages, because, that's the culture we live in. And, we need to assure that everybody is engaged. Having all the staff that can communicate in the native language is important. And, having access to tools and your parents having access to tools and working with your parents on that. We had to distribute Chromebooks as a school. And what we do is we offer a weekly, my boss has been very creative with, figuring out a very efficient way. And our front office manager, she's been amazing, with really coming up with a structured system that supports all parents. And from, being able to distribute those Chromebooks, and, our dean does a good job of managing the Chromebooks from home or from, on site and home, and also distributing paper packets is critical, because we've also had families that we saw, even we were trying to coach them through that free online or that free internet. It was difficult for some families to acquire that. And some families had children, were essential workers, and they had children who were with caregivers who didn't know technology. And, also we needed to make sure that some of those assignments were translated, because some of the caregivers were not, they were more literate in Spanish. So, we needed to assure that they could, support children as well. So, the resources, having the staff, having, the hybrid of paper online, and also, the technology, the apps. My busiest app right now, if you look at my phone, would actually be an app called Talking Points. And talking points is something I discovered like 2 years ago. I think it's Han Hoon, he put up an article about it, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And I played with it for a little bit, and Nancy Lee over at Talking Points, she's amazing. When you have a question, she answers it. And Talking Points, it can work like a text where you can send a message, and then your parents get like a mass message, and it's a two-way translation system. So I can send that message in English, and I have a mom that, she gets it in Swahili. I have another mom who gets it in Urdu, and then I have multiple parents who get it in Spanish, all at the same time. And so they get the message. It is a Google platform. Google Translate, it's improved over the years. It's gotten better. So they get the idea. And sometimes I may have to clarify, but they get the idea. And so it becomes, a relationship building tool where we're messaging back and forth almost like we're texting each other. And so that's a app I had established early on when we opened the school 2 years ago. So, I mean, like that was something that, has become part of our culture, and our multilingual families are all on it, and we assure they're all on it. And then also we built in Seesaw. And Seesaw, what's nice about Seesaw is it's easy to access. If a family's struggling with internet, they could access it via phone. And it actually adapts to a family's language platform. So if my device is in Arabic, it will adapt to Arabic with some of the instructions on there and some of the guidance on there. So, I mean, with Seesaw, it's a wonderful app. And for the teacher, you can find some really, you can find assignments in the activity library or create your own. You can get a starter account for free. As a school, we've looked into just purchasing the whole thing because it's been great for, our parents love it, and they feel like it's an easy platform for them to access. And then the other resource that our kindergarten teacher was playing with was something called ClassTag, where it kind of works like, a dojo system would, but, we prefer to use more of just like a direct conversation. And, ClassTag does that, and you can post photos, you can post journals as well. So, I mean, that's another option. And we use that in the kinder. And it was a really nice communication tool. And like Talking Points, you can it's kind of like you're texting back and forth. So I felt like our teachers were very creative with how they communicated with parents. And that was key. And then even like when we struggled with technology and we struggled with getting a hold of people, we used snail mail. And that was just us being creative with, okay, I'm going to send, this child an envelope, with a letter, and I'm just going to give them an envelope with a stamp and tell them to write me back. And they do. They get excited about getting mail, and the parents have actually said like, oh, thank you for sending a letter. We're excited. They're excited. So, we've done that. Phone calls. Your phone can make phone calls. Yes. I know, we're always talking about apps, but phones actually call people, and you can talk to people on phones. We forget that.
Whatever it takes.
Actually, yes, whatever it takes. So actually making a phone call, has been, I think I've made more phone calls now than I ever have with families. And I think that, unifies the community itself. I, had a mom who we were doing an assignment on Canva, and they were making a little, they're making a little vision board, and, the child was struggling. She sent me a message on Talking Points. I said, let me just call you. And she was just kind of like, wow, you guys just call every time, we need something, and we do. And, that's where our role has changed, with this pandemic. And we need to, I think a year ago, if you said, really your families have your cell number, I would have been, it was a little, different. But now we're looking at this and we're like, okay, yeah, they have my cell number. They can call me, this is my personal cell, but they can call me. Because we kind of have to understand what we're up against.
Right. Yeah, well said. So it sounds like you really recommend multiple communication channels, knowing that there is no one size fits all. Like some families might be nervous to answer the phone for many reasons, whereas other families might really prefer an app with the translation and texting. I love what you said in your blog about resources being a gateway to instructional equity. And it really just reminds me of, the United States, and we work with folks internationally. So hello to anyone, joining us in any time zone. But I know in the United States, we have federal protections for English learners. And you mentioned providing translations, that needs to be there. It's actually required, right, by law to have that. But a lot of districts, and in my experience too right now, are really struggling. If they didn't have these things in place now, it's hard to catch up, right, when we most need it. So that brings me to your last R with your 3 R's, and that is response. Like, what are we doing right now? I'd love to hear you articulate your recommendations for us. And then we do have a question from the chat that I'd like to get your feedback on as well. So tell us about the response piece that you recommend.
You know, with the response piece, we have to be flexible and we have to adjust. And we've learned that if we are not flexible in these times with parents and their children, that, you know, it's really going to hurt the relationship that we've already built with them. And so it could be different ways where we saw, okay, we put out this hybrid matrix, and the way we laid it out, there were a couple parents that didn't understand it. So then we laid it out a different way. One of our TAs suggested, you know, because she was a parent herself, and she suggested, you know, maybe you need to lay this out a different way. It's the idea of response is this, that you need to be quick on your feet and efficient right now, because, you know, anything is going to come at you. And you also need to be listening to what your families are telling you. We had an MPAC meeting already, you know, and I'm telling districts this. My recommendation is, just because you're not meeting in person with your BPAC doesn't mean you shouldn't be meeting with them. And, you know, they've given me suggestions on what they think they need translated, how to give out work, and what they felt, you know, has worked. And also they just, you know, they like us being in touch with their children. We're doing, even at night, I do a story time at night at 7:30 at night on Thursdays. During Ramadan, I pre-recorded them, but now I'm going back to being live. And that's just to have that piece too, that social emotional. Our dean sprang into action with coming up with the idea of virtually having what you would call our crew, which is some schools would call it a morning meeting. We call it crew because it's more about being actively, it's EL education actually. It's more about being actively engaged in your learning. And so she was creating reflection prompts, and we were putting them online for kids to respond. Kids were responding through pictures that they were sending me, and they were like excited that we would put them up on Twitter. Like, hey, I'm a Twitter, I'm a celebrity. So, I mean, like, you know, you know, that was kind of our way of responding, where, you know, we saw that there was a need for resources for our families to, you know, have, you know, the learning at their fingertips. We saw that, you know, some families struggled with the layout, and even visually with the layout of some things we were doing. So we had to change that up. I mean, I had a mom that said, you know, I don't speak Spanish, I don't read Spanish. You have an assignment that has both languages on there. I don't mind that you have the Spanish on there, but can you put it on there in a different way so it doesn't confuse my child? Okay, fine, we can do that. And just being flexible and just being there for our families and children in need, and understanding that, like, you know, these are times where you need to have grace for people. You need to be, you know, forgiving. And so, like, if a family's struggling to get work done, there could be many reasons. It's not just because they're not doing it. You know, there could be many reasons. You could have somebody that's dealing with the virus in the home, and the child is struggling because they have nobody to help them because the person who's helping them is in isolation. Or there could be an issue where a parent is an essential worker and they're working, and the child's with a caregiver, but the child's still struggling with the work. We don't know. So we have to be really flexible with how we're giving that work, and how we're communicating with parents.
Excellent. It's really chock full of some great suggestions. What I'm taking away from this right now is this idea of the reciprocity. Like, it's not just, I always talk about, it's not just one-way communication. It has to be two-way. So you're talking about make sure you're listening, because you can't respond unless you're listening. And that's what you started out by saying, listen to your families. So providing those channels and the students alike. And that's really helpful advice. I know that we do have a question that we'd love your input on. And if you have any others, feel free to send them to us, you know, now or later, because we always want to help people. That's what it's all about. Yeah. And the question is from Amanda Goddard, another change agent. Hey, Amanda. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Amanda.
So she's asking you, Sarah, can you recommend any resources to learn about cultural traditions that go beyond heroes and holidays? So maybe the deeper aspects of culture.
I mean, if you were even going through some of Teaching Tolerance's resources, they have great resources that accompany all of the, like right now, I saw a lot of resources they were putting out about Asian American and Pacific Islander American Month, that really
Mhm.
supported learning more about cultures. And, I'm acquiring so many picture books, and I know, Amanda, you're at the high school level, but still, I think those picture books are beneficial in learning the authentic voice when they're written by a writer who is coming from that culture and coming from the community. I would recommend Island Born. That's a great book. I'm trying to think off the top of my
Yeah.
head now.
So it's
You
primary
know,
text and it's literature
primary text, yeah,
to simplify.
literature,
And then
yeah,
going
and the
to
students, the
right,
students
exactly.
themselves, like, and that's where I think a lot of our learning about cultures is happening with family engagement at AMSA, is that it's coming from the families, it's coming from the students. One of the things that kind of irks me when I go to a cultural fest is when, and I've had to make this as a parent too. We're making this board, right? This trifold board about a country, okay? And yes, the country is the culture, it's important, but where are we putting our family in that board?
Mhm.
So one of the things that we started doing was family boards, because one, like if you look at my family, we are Palestinian, we are Syrian, and we are Jordanian. And if you look at my background, I even have Polish in my bloodline. Okay. So are we going to tell a kid just pick one country and only one country to do a board on? No. Do a family board about your whole family and all your traditions. And I think for me,
Mhm.
learning about those cultures, that's been the most authentic for me.
Love that. So going right to the source, and I know when you talk about
Yeah.
Bell Packs or MPACs, we're talking about the parent advisory councils, and that's
Yes.
one of the thrusts of that work from parent
Uh,
advisory folks that I know like you is working with families directly as they're the
yes.
source and help teach
Hmm.
us about what you need, and not to make generalizations, right? Like not every family
Yeah.
can, like you said, can represent a whole country.
No.
It's so much more complex
No.
than that. That's a
And
really
my
important
family
point.
can't.
Yeah.
My
So
family can't. No.
right. You can't. No, exactly. And that's a helpful reminder. So as we wind down, I want to just address something else here from Lindsay Rinder. Welcome. Suggestions,
Hi.
resources, or other resources, websites or other resources that can help our L parents with foundational reading skills at home, and as well as explain, the resources of how we quote do school in the U.S. being different culturally. Those are some big questions, but do you have any ideas offhand that we can provide for Lindsay?
So we're talking about doing school in the US, or are we talking about supporting our child at home?
I think we're asking about these two separate questions, both for
Yeah, that's
Lindsay.
two
Yeah.
questions. Okay.
Mhm.
So what I would say, the first one, we actually are doing what we call a virtual summer school. And what we found was that Lexia, which is, it's an online program for literacy, is pretty effective. The kids can be self-sufficient on it. And it also even gives directions in Spanish if you put the native language there. So if you're looking for something that the kids can do at home, I would say Lexia would be great. For our parents, also Lakeshore Learning. I don't know if that is Lakeshore more of a national company. I think it
It
is.
is. Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They have a lot of resources as well. In a past role, and actually in this current role too, I've actually worked with Lakeshore to create parent resources, like parent-child resource bags to support kids at home. So that's something that I would look into as well. In terms of school in the United States, that's something that it depends on the language. It depends on, the district and where you are geographically, and, what you're looking for exactly in terms of explaining school to parents. I've written things for them myself
Mhm.
because I feel like every school is different,
Right.
and every set of expectations is different, especially being an expeditionary learning school. We are very unique. And so, like, I've been working on a parent guide for our multilingual learners right now that explains our multilingual learning program, but also within the context of EL education, and where, that comes in for families who are also trying to learn US schooling too.
Right.
So I think
Yeah.
creating it yourself might be better if you have people that speak the native language.
I love that. And I would offer to Lindsay, in my work is having done family literacy programs and stuff as a former teacher is just like Sarah said, the more homegrown, the better. It's hard to find an out of the box solution, but there's some resources that Sarah just provided, but it's all about, that contact, and the relationship. So going back to the first R, right? Having those relationships there and providing that support for families. So I just want to remind our audience as we close out, you can find Sarah Saeed at Mrs. Saeed 17 on Twitter. So please do follow her if you're not already. And she does crank out blogs and advice, chock full of ideas as she shared today. I really want to encourage folks to stay connected to her and to us. If there's other ideas that you'd like to hear us speak about or people that you'd like to hear us feature, please let us know through our social media channels. This is an exciting, I guess, silver lining, isn't it, Sarah, that we're now doing remote things, and so we can try things like this and try to reach the masses through ways.
We can grow our programs differently. Like I'm seeing that my parents do really well at their MPAC meeting on Zoom, and they say it's easier to have an MPAC meeting on Zoom because they have little kids in the house. So now I'm starting to wonder, should I run my MPAC meetings within the building, but also have a Zoom channel for those people with children? Because we're always wondering about transportation and babysitting. Okay, maybe we have another option there. Like it's really brought my wheels turning.
It's exciting. It's hard to think about things being exciting when things are so challenging, but it is important to do that as leaders.
Let's look at that silver lining. Yes, we got to look at that silver lining. And I think that, out of this, we might find ways to really reimagine and improve our schools.
I'm hopeful of that. That's a wonderful way to end it, Sarah. Thanks again for being with us today. And thanks again for everyone for tuning in. And we look forward to hearing your ideas and thoughts. And hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.
Hi.
Thanks, Sarah. Bye.
Thank you.